Listeners, I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I would say. My good friend.
Yeah, and I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. And you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Payne, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Payne? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC to do this poll?
Information because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
And Claudette, good luck with everything.
You too, man. May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a young man too, so stop it. Tell everybody you are a young man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more, who've always aspired to do better, who've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
And if you're not careful with how and what you say on radio, you will cause people to fight here.
I thrive on that controversy. Some people hate it, but I love it. In other words, every time something goes viral, it's about Kem Jones.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Hello and welcome to the March 19th edition of the Bubb Report. I am Rion Charles, the Bubb Report's assistant producer. This week on our program, we take a deep dive into mental health, one of the last taboos of Grenadian and Caribbean society. There have been growing concerns about increasing mental health problems among individuals in Grenada and the Caribbean. Like other countries, Grenada continues to demonstrate that stigma is associated with mental illness. Historically, cultural norms have often associated mental illness with spiritual desecration, personal failing, and supernatural forces. These superstitions have resulted in a significant number of mental health problems that go undiagnosed, unreported, untreated, and in turn understudied. In addition to these factors, limited resources for research have created difficulty in obtaining estimates on mental disorders in Grenada and the wider Caribbean. We sit with a team of mental health and legal experts to discuss their role in changing colonial-era legislation used to treat mental illnesses in Grenada. The Colonial-Era Mental Health Act still refers to citizens as lunatics and imbeciles. Our guests say the legal and public health infrastructure for addressing mental health among citizens needs a radical overhaul. Also on our program, we speak with representatives of two major trade union organizations in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who won a landmark victory against the Ralph Gonzalves administration. The workers' union sued the administration over the government's decision to terminate their employment.
While we're applying for judicial review, we are also alerting the court to the fact that we are bringing a constitutional motion which says that all of the actions which the government has taken, including the declaration of the public health emergency, is unconstitutional, illegal, and void because the government did not follow the proper procedure in keeping with the declaration of an emergency.
The terminated workers at the time maintained that they did not abandon or resign their jobs as the government claimed.
Until the case where the teachers, public servants, other frontline workers challenging the constitutionality of the government's requirement on which they didn't follow, and as a result, they abandoned their jobs. Put yourself in a possible win-win situation now. Apply for your job. It's not a trick. You can still pursue your case, but apply for your job.
High Court Justice Esco Henry said the special measures rules made under the SR&O, the vaccine mandate law, were unlawful, unconstitutional, and void.
Leadership requires that you take decisions which are in the public interest, that we claim collective ownership of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to protect lives and livelihoods, protect the children in the schools and other teachers, and to protect the patients in the hospital and members of the public. So I'm clear about how we acted and the reasons why we acted.
We welcome our guests, Attorney at Law Ruggles Ferguson, QC, Anne Graves of the Grenada Friends of the Mentally Ill, Dr. Evelyn Spencer, Senior House Officer at the Mount Gay Mental Hospital. Here to make sense of the COVID ruling in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are Oswald Robinson, President of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union, and Elroy Boucher of the Public Service Union of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And now, here is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled, How Toilets Are a Poverty-Fighting Tool. We thank you for watching.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. Please remember to share this live stream so that other people on your Facebook and Twitter and YouTube news feeds can have an opportunity to partake in this enriching program. Now, last week, the National Democratic Congress administration continued its commitment to meeting the people at frequent town hall meetings in the state. This time, the transformation caravan made its way through the constituency of St. David, a historic NDC stronghold. The Prime Minister and his team announced with great fanfare a WASH program, as if it was a new initiative piloted by them. The reality, however, is that the WASH program is not new, as this clip from a few years ago would demonstrate.
The Rotary Club of Grenada East is doing its part to ensure that returning to school this term is a pleasant experience. As part of the Water Sanitation and Hygiene Project, also known as the WASH Project, the St. Joseph's RC School was the lucky recipient of not only refurbishment, but amenities to improve water security. More in this report from Annette Moore.
This is a very brief Rotary International, a global leader in humanitarian service, identifies 6 areas of focus which is geared to improve lives. Rotary Club Grenada East selected water, sanitation and hygiene as one of the area of focus to conduct a project.
The recent delivery of the WASH project just cost the Rotary Club of Grenada East more than $20,000 to complete, but the club and the St. Joseph's RC School principal are thrilled with the results.
When I went into the bathroom and my shoe didn't go in water, that was a big, big difference, because you go inside there, your shoe wet, and the poor children go inside there and their shoe wet. So you are making a difference.
On Tuesday, September 4th, the Rotary Club formally presented the refurbished washroom facilities, which were retiled and painted, and where required, toilets fully restored to functionality. Several water leaks were also resolved and inadequate pipelines replaced with larger bore lines to ensure an adequate supply of water to washrooms and other areas of the school. Additionally, 2 new 800-gallon water tanks were installed and the load-bearing capacity of the tank support structures strengthened.
So when Rotary has fundraising projects, we appeal to the wider community for support, because every cent that we raise goes back into the community.
Ramdini thanked fellow Rotarians who assisted with painting, but specifically highlighted Alphonsus Daniel and his team, who ran all of the new pipelines into the washroom facility and installed the water tanks.
There is so much we need to do as Ministry of Education to improve the aesthetics of your building and of your school. And we cannot do it, because we have so much to do. So when organizations come together and provide this assistance to our schools, we are indeed grateful.
The WASH project, which began in 2015, aims to provide sustainable water, sanitation and hygiene to primary schools in the parishes of St. Andrew, St. David and St. Patrick. For the National Report, I'm Annette Moore.
And that was the GIS reporter there, Annette Moore. Now also, former Minister for Social Security and Housing, Delma Thomas, announced the New National Party's initiative in 2019 to deliver 10,000 bathroom and toilet facilities to vulnerable and marginalized families across the country. In making the announcement during her contribution to the 2020 and the 2021 budget debates, respectively, in Parliament, the minister then said that this program will be done in keeping with the focus of the National Sustainable Development Plan of 2020 to 2035, which was meant to promote balanced, harmonious, and inclusive development in the country. Then Minister Thomas spoke of plans to earmark on a project that will give grants in undisclosed sums to thousands of homeowners currently using pit latrines to enable them to construct bathroom and toilets with potable water. In 2015, the then administration increased bathroom and toilet funding from 5 to 7 million EC dollars. There is, however, a difference in Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell's pronouncement, and that is the role that the private sector should play in providing toilet facilities to citizens as part of a public-private partnership, and that must be commended. In the 2021 budget debate, however, when Delma Thomas praised the success of the initiative, she was roundly ridiculed by some who are today applauding the same initiative in their first instance. Now, in the first budget debate, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell said that he will give credits to the previous administration for projects and programs that they started and has continued under his watch. Now, the bathroom and toilet program is a perfect example of government being a continuum. This process is analogous to a relay race where batons exchange hands or hands exchange batons from one government to another with the overall intent of getting to the destination of the race, which is to win the trophy. And what is that trophy? It is the trophy of sustainable national development. Now, in a relay race, there is not supposed to be any ambiguity. In other words, the rule from one baton to the other is simple. If anything, the sole common feature in a relay race is collective action, which translates to collective victory that is to be shared by everyone. And that is the victory of development. Now, the reality about bathroom and toilet projects is that it is a crucial tool in the fight against poverty. a total of 15.5 million people are forced to practice open defecation in Latin America and the Caribbean, a practice that can pollute the environment and spread disease, warned the Pan American Health Organization. Open defecation is an unhealthy practice, said Marcos Espinal, who is the director of the Department of Communicable Disease and Environmental Determinants of Health at PAHO. He went on to say, quote, improving access to water and sanitation through multi-sectoral policies and actions is critical to prevent disease and save lives. And at this point, we wish to welcome our first panel for this week. We have our returning guest here, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson. By the way, Attorney Ferguson, congratulations on your recent designation as KC. Yes? I'm accurate about that, correct?
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yes,
yes,
you very much.
It's good to have you here, sir. And I believe this is the first time you're appearing for the new year. So happy belated new year. And
Yes,
we have Anne Graves, who is a member of the organization representing the mentally ill in Grenada, the Friends of the Mentally Ill. Ms. Anne Graves, this is your first time on the Bubb Report. We welcome you. Just unmute your mic there for us, please. If you see the little microphone icon at the top right corner of the box. While you figure that out, we are going to welcome our next guest. He is Dr. Evelyn Spencer, who is the chief custodian, I would say, and I am subject to correction, of Grenada's lone mental health facility. Dr. Spencer, welcome to the Bubb Report.
Yes, thank you for having me, but I'm not the chief custodian in any shape or form.
Kindly
in there and do a lot. My name is mentioned in many things, but I'm not going to take it.
So okay, you would not take that designation. Okay, all right, Ms. Graves, welcome to the program.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me on this program. And my name is Greaves and not Graves.
It's Greaves. Yes. Absolutely. Thank you for that correction. Yeah. Absolutely. We want to make sure that everyone is on board here. But Ruggles, before we get into this mental health conversation, as a journalist, I would put you on the spot here. As you know, currently there is a data protection bill that is making its way through the legislative ringer in the Parliament of Grenada. Have you had a chance to hear what your colleague attorneys on the ground are saying about this particular legislation at all? Or are you been so busy with cases?
Yes. Good morning to you and good morning to all listeners and viewers. I have been out of circulation a bit over the last 2-3 weeks. Okay. I've been out of state. In fact, I'm still out of state, but in the Caribbean now. So I have not been following it too much, but I've been checked by several people, media outlets, to do programs on it, which I intend to start this coming week.
Okay.
I have had the opportunity to glance at the proposed bill. In fact, I was involved in discussions probably more than 10 years ago in relation to a suite of legislation that included the data protection bill. I'm not too sure if this current bill mirrors that bill. It's something I have to double check, but I know at the time, about 10 years ago, it was promoted by the International Telecommunications Union and the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. So it's an important bill, but also there are issues that the public, need to be aware of. Like all bills passed by Parliament or acts passed by Parliament, the persons who are required to follow the mandate is the mass of people out there, and therefore it's important that people understand these bills. And I think that probably is one of the continues. It continues to be a challenge with insufficient dissemination of information and the public legal education when it comes to these bills that possibly impinge on fundamental rights and freedoms. But as
now, you said I will follow up here. You said that that particular bill was a part of a suite of legislation before. Did you have an opportunity then to at least review that particular bill? And did you have any concerns then about its contents, or did you not get that far?
Yeah, well, that was probably more than 11 years ago. So I have to refresh myself. But what I can say, like all these bills that relate to developments in technology, relate to privacy, touch and concern privacy, it is important. There's always the balancing act to ensure that you achieve the objective of the bill, which is really personal data protection on the one hand, and there are no possibilities or opportunities to abuse those who have power under the act, to abuse that power for other reasons other than what the bill is intended to achieve. So I intend to look at both bills closely because as far as I understand, this one is promoted by the eGRIP project,
correct,
which is slightly different from what it was then. But I intend to do, because several entities have checked me on it, and I intend to do, starting this week, some public education, sensitization, and explanation as best as I could as to the contents of the bill, the pros and cons.
Mm-hmm. And
so
finally,
I would like to take away from the
correct. But finally, yes, I am aware. Finally, final question, and I'll get to Dr. Spencer and Ms. Greaves to begin the mental health discussion. But in the past, in respect of a consultation with civil society partners, what has been the protocol before particular legislation goes before Parliament? Is it always the case that government consults with, for example, the Bar Association? You are the president of the Bar. Is it always the case that they consult with the Bar before bringing legislation to Parliament, or that's not necessarily a par for the course all the time?
No, well, it's always a call, and it has always been from the Bar Association and other civil society groupings that not all legislation, certainly, but when you have important bits of legislation that impact on fundamental rights and freedoms, possibly, then it's important to ensure a smooth passage of the legislation with the least controversy. It's important that you have that kind of consultation and public education, and to get entities like the Bar Association and others to assist the public education process. It's of good practice. And it's not always done. It has not always been done. It has been the consistent call. And, hopefully with this bit of legislation, but I think it's an important piece of legislation, but it's also important too that the concerns of the public be addressed. And also whether there are any misconceptions, that these are also addressed.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Ferguson. We had to get that newsworthy piece out of the way because we had a conversation with Dr. Alexis last week, but on the same issue.
That conversation. Yes.
Correct. I would send that to you. So perhaps because we did get him to essentially examine the bill clause by clause, as they say in the legislature. So Dr. Spencer, again, welcome, sir. And I want to start off this conversation by talking about the current context of the service of mental health in Grenada. Now, over the years, service providers at the Mount Gay Hospital have been complaining about occupational health and safety challenges that they have experienced at the facility. Now, let us look at the dossier of challenges. In December last year, workers went on the picket line protesting physical and verbal abuse. In September 2017, the union representing workers there called for improvements at the facility. In late 2020, reports emerged of the alleged rape of a patient by a caregiver at the facility, something that the Friends of the Mentally Ill highlighted. Nurse Patty Williams, for example, suffered a serious injury at the facility as well, which resulted in the loss of the functionality in her hands. Now, Dr. Spencer, the question to you is, are these capacity challenges at the Mungay facility emblematic of how we prioritize mental health in our society? You need to unmute the mic again, sir. Yes.
I think there are many issues, I suppose, in the throughout the health system. And I don't want to say it is peculiar to Mungay Hospital, but there are many issues. Mungay Hospital is different in many ways from the other hospitals.
Okay.
And I would think that the behavior, some of the behavior, I would think, stems maybe from our own, the way in which we see the persons who are there as patients. I think we should look at that as part of the problem, and maybe we need to take a view of ensuring that persons are trained and trained, not constantly. Then, regular upgrading, training, sufficient staff. We need to get staff who are keen and willing to work in that facility, because it's not an easy place to work, because we know of the behavioral issues and so with the patients. Yeah. The physical structure needs that's another story. It needs a lot of repairing and getting it in a fit state, so that it could be more provide a more caring facility. And finally, I would think there is a toilet facility that is next door to us, and that provides in itself another set of a different set of problems, not only for the staff, but also for the patients. The staff who is passing for 6 or 8 hours, they go home and they could rid themselves of that. But there are many issues, and I could understand the occupational, why we make such bad news, or we get such bad news assigned to us. It's no
okay. Yeah. All right. Let me bring in Ms. Greaves here. You representing the Friends of the Mentally Ill. Now, in a 2009, and that's a 2009 WHO AIMS report on the state of mental health in Grenada, and I'm quoting from the report now. It says, quote, "Grenada does not have a mental health information system and an information-based mental health policy and plan. In terms of annual reporting of mental health data, Grenada is among the majority of countries without a system for the annual reporting of mental health data. It is among several countries in the Caribbean without a health authority or department in the Ministry of Health to drive mental health activities at the highest political level." Now, how is your organization advocating for mental health to be taken seriously by the political directorate, notwithstanding that the new Minister of Health last year in October the Honorable Senator Jonathan Lacrette said that his administration would make mental health a priority. Ms. Graves?
Yes. Well, you were just talking to the president, Dr. Evelyn Spencer is our president. I'm one of the directors.
Okay.
But yeah, what you've actually said there is quite true.
Yeah.
We have been working assiduously, I would say. Some may disagree. We've done a lot of educational work with regards to sensitizing the public, because that is part of our mission, and trying to destigmatize and break down the myths that surround mental illness. Yes, welcome Senator Lacrette, Minister Lacrette's view, and he's actually said this year is actually going to be the year for mental health. It is actually great. We welcome that, but we at Friends of the Mentally Ill have been knocking at the door for a while, and we've been concerned about a number of issues. As you know, the 2009 bill, mental health bill, Mr. Ferguson actually was the person who drafted that bill, and persons in the community was sensitized about that bill, and we were really looking forward to having it become act, because each day we see persons with mental health difficulties or disability, their rights, their fundamental rights. I mean, a little while ago, Mr. Ferguson and yourself was talking about fundamental rights with regards to the data bill that's being discussed now. But each day, persons that suffering with psychiatric illness, their mental health, their rights are violated daily. And this has been a very big concern for us. And it's strange that I remember once Mr. Ferguson saying there's no one there to drive mental health, but we've been there, Mr. Ferguson. Friends of the Mentally Ill was established in 1999. It wasn't a strong advocacy group, but over the years it has become stronger, and it's unfortunate that physical health is seen differently to mental health. And even though there's been a little bit of input by past governments, right? We're still a long way to go. We talk about achieving the Millennium Goal. We're far from it, of leaving no one behind, because we are leaving the mentally ill behind. The facility that where Dr. Spencer works, it's a disgrace. I would say it's a disgrace. It's overcrowded. It doesn't offer enough leisure space for the patients. And you talk about incidents that has happened here. One of the incidents you failed to mention was there's been a death up there in 2000, I believe it's 2016. So the very fact that we don't have facility to house patients who need a forensic input is also a big issue. It's a facility that we should have really never accepted as a psychiatric facility. I don't think, and yes, it's overcrowded, but I also feel that we've also been looking at what can be done in the community. And I believe if we shift some of the care into the community, which can be costly, but it will make sense, then that will solve the overcrowding problem. But if we also move the acute Ragdoon ward, which should be in a main hospital, that will also solve the problem, because that will free up another maybe 20-something beds, right? So yes, we've been there, and our voices has been raising, and more so recently. I first became involved in Friends of the Mentally Ill when someone in my community where I was born got shot by the police in his knee, and there was no community mental health plan to see in place to see how he would be he would be supported in the community, and that's how I got involved with Friends of the Mentally Ill, because I wanted to make a change. It's fine when we say we're working at places, but we're not able to effect change. And I believe there are many professionals, different walks, who are happy to maintain a status quo, will not put themselves on the, to say, look, this is wrong. We need to actually change. We need to actually.
And you said something that's very important. We have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And for people who sometimes criticize, they would say, well, the government isn't doing this, or particular institutions are not doing this. But you come forward and do nothing to make a change in the world, in the context of Grenada as well. But Ruggles, let me bring you in here. Now, the Mental Health Act, or I should say revisions to the Mental Health Act, because the current Mental Health Act in Grenada is a colonial era Mental Health Act that's titled the Mental Hospitals Act, that was legislated in 1895.
It's 85. 85.
Is it 1885? 18.
Yes.
Well, according to the WHO, the WHO needs to update their site, because I could not find a contemporary digital account of that particular act online. But it's 1885. So thank you for that note of correction. I was just citing what's on the WHO site here. But there is a draft document. Now, that draft document has been in place for almost a decade now. Now, what areas of the current Mental Health Act concerns you as an attorney that can potentially infringe on the human rights of the mentally ill? Now, I'm citing again that 2009 World Health Organization report. It says, quote, none of the treatment facilities has had an external review and inspection to assess the human rights protection of users of mental health services in Grenada. Similarly, none of the mental health staff had at least a one-day training, meeting, or other type of working session on this theme, unquote. Ruggles, your thoughts on the act and the revisions that you're proposing, how are they going to improve on its current deficiencies?
Yes.
From a legal perspective.
Thank you. Yes, well, I became involved in this since back in 2004, I believe. That's about 19 years now, 2004. And
you aged well, sir.
Well, thank you. At that time, it was PAO, and I was asked to assist with the putting together of a proposed new mental health act, with a draft bill, and that was done using the Jamaica model, which was one of the more modern bits of legislation in the region. That was done sometime in 2004, 2005, sent to PAHO, and with their own technical experts, they did their upgrades. And I was requested back probably in 2009, 2010 to hold consultations throughout the country with regard to the bill, which I did. In fact, I even prepared a brochure at the time, and I did consultations throughout Grenada in each parish, including Carriacou, and among the key stakeholders, including at the Mongay Hospital, including with the police, and in each parish that we went, in fact, the police were involved. Now, what really has to take place is a complete transformation. You refer to it as a colonial era act. Yes, it's an 1885 act, and I can tell you, Kellon, when I first interfaced with it, I was shocked.
I mean, the language in there, referring to people by names I'm not even going to reference here, but it's names that we call people in our society.
Precisely.
And it's interesting to see the etymology of it, but go ahead. Yes.
Yes, it's the names and that's the law. That's the law as it exists. That 1885 Act is the act that exists up to today, 138 years old, without amendment. And when you look at the short title to the act, it speaks to, I don't have it before me, but it's an act to deal with lunatics, basically. And it refers to mental health patients as lunatics. You have reference to pauper lunatics. You have criminal.
Yes, so it says, quote, this is an act to provide for the custody of lunatics. The law provides for the following parts. Lunacy, mental hospitals, licensed houses, criminal lunatics, maintenance of lunatics, offenses in relation to lunatic. I mean, this is just...
It speaks to idiots. Now, that is an act that you have existed. That's our act today. So it's not surprising when you hear about all of these issues that face mental patients. And one of the features of the new act, first and foremost, well, it replaces, or the draft bill, it seeks to replace the outdated Mental Hospitals Act of 1885. It provides for the treatment and care of mental patients. No, and it focuses more on community care than institutional care. In fact, it takes into account what the fundamental rights and freedoms of modern constitutions are. And those fundamental rights and freedoms are applicable to mental patients too. It's not save mental patients. You have these fundamental rights and freedoms. And therefore, issues, for example, that concern property, issues that concern liberty, and how the intake at the mental hospital and the procedure that you follow if you are to institutionalize that person. In fact, the act has specified periods that you can that you can institutionalize a patient for. And ultimately, if you have to do it for longer, you have assessment boards and so set up to do that. One of the things I discovered then is that the mental hospital is supposed to be a hospital, yes, but when you check, people were there for 40 years, 35 years, 30 years. Many of the quote-unquote patients who are there, many, for example, have been abandoned by their families, or their families were not able to maintain them and so just imagine if you had to draw a parallel that you have people going into the general hospital that they're injured and they end up staying there 30-something years later. Where would you find the space for other patients? So there was a clear procedure set out. And to keep a mental health patient, it has to be certified, first by a medical practitioner, and then you have, of course, a psychiatrist. So there are a number of factors that came into play, but most importantly, in terms of the changes, you would have the community care, and not waiting until you develop a database of persons with mental health challenges in the respective communities, and it provided for the care and treatment of these people at the community level and even at their homes. So you arrest the problem instead of waiting for an explosion where the police now need to get involved. And that was another major issue, because you had the involvement of the police, who are not specifically trained to deal with mental health patients. And they have complained, for example, that when there is an issue, then they are called out. And what the police use, as they know, when people, quote unquote, give in trouble, is to use force. So most times, when there is an interaction with a mental health patient, you hear the person is either shot dead or seriously injured, in order to restrain that person to take them to the hospital. But now, in the modern period, you don't have police officers. There might be. If there is an extreme case, you have people who are specially trained to interface with these people. So when you have the first signs that someone is going, then you intervene at that point. And even though it gets violent, there are ways, for example, I remember during the consultation, taser guns, injections, and these things to restrain, as opposed to being badly beaten and brutalized and eventually subdued and taken to hospital. So, it really, the new bill really gives a totally different perspective to mental patients. So first of all,
Mr. Ferguson, yeah, if I may, I mean, that bill was drafted almost a decade ago. I'm surprised that it has not made its way through the rungs of the legislative rungs of Parliament.
Yes, more than that. Actually, I remember coming from a meeting somewhere. I believe it was the Bahamas or somewhere, about 12 years ago, and I had a deadline to submit the consultations, the results of the consultations, all the consultations throughout the country. I remember staying up the entire night because I saw this as a very urgent project in order to meet the deadline the following day and to send it in. And I have not heard anything about that since then. I've spoken about it from time to time. And in fact, let me take the opportunity to commend Ms. Greaves and Dr. Spencer. You referred to him as the custodian. And even though he does not hold the official title, I think he has been giving human service to the mentally ill, and the Friends of the Mentally Ill, they have been promoting and seeking to sensitize in their limited ways issues surrounding the mentally ill. But you need more than that, because you need to have legislation passed that would reflect. Now, if you have a school child, as you know, the mentally ill people, they are teased. They are part of the marginalized in society. And as the saying goes, you judge society on based on how they treat the poor and marginalized. So if you have somebody calling a mentally challenged person a lunatic, what's the problem there? That's how the law calls them up to this very day. Lunatics, criminal lunatics, pauper lunatics, idiots. And so therefore we have to move away from that language and create that culture which says that mentally ill people, they are people too. They are subjected and are entitled to the same fundamental rights and freedoms under our Constitution that all others are entitled to. And you have a comprehensive package, an approach to deal with it that moves away from this old archaic colonial period approach.
Absolutely. Let me bring back Dr. Spencer and Ms. Graves here. Now, going back to the Minister of Health, the current Minister of Health, last
Can
year.
I say?
Yes, go ahead if you wanted to add something. Go ahead, quickly.
Mr. Ferguson, KC had talked about the archaic laws and of the land, but where's our heads? Our heads are not any further forward in, because we still see the patient that way. It's not just many persons who call the patients by those names have no access to the bill, but this is how we've been read. And I think
it's a legacy of colonialism. It is a legacy of colonialism.
But it probably so it is. But I think that in order for anything to change, because we'll have the law and so on that we know how to treat the patient differently. But I think in order for us to move forward as a people, we have to change our educational system where we introduce little ones to the diversity of human beings and recognize that we all are humans and need to, like I say, have all of these rights. And unless the educational system doesn't incorporate this, where you will have people of all whether you have Down syndrome or you're on you have a psychotic illness or behavioral issues, or you're a tomboy or someone else, that you are in that class and everybody recognizes you as a human being. So nobody will want to tease you in school because you're a bit slower than the rest of the classroom. Now, the issue here is that we do not go to sorry if I'm going too far off, but we do not go and get patients. The patients live in a house, in a home with someone, and that someone recognizes the changes in the individual's behavior. So that's where it has to start. We have to be willing to accept that my son, my daughter, whoever else has an illness, and let us seek help for it. Don't wait for the police, because the police shouldn't have any role in the majority of cases. Once you see
and as Ruggles says, that they're ill-equipped, to treat with mentally ill patients, not only in Grenada, but we see that in many countries. In fact,
Yes,
here in the quote-unquote great United States of America, we see what law enforcement did recently in my neighboring state of Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia, in Henrico County. 6 police officers essentially killed a mentally ill man at a mental health facility, right? So it's something that needs treating with. But go ahead, sir.
But the police is of similar ilk, just that they don't see the patients. I mean, all of us in the same community, so that's how we see the patients. I just happen to be working as a policeman, but that doesn't change my view of the patients. C or M or L, it doesn't change that. My job is just why can I not be humane? And unless a person, even when persons are very agitated and angry, if you speak to them in a manner that is show that you're concerned and try and diffuse the situation, you have 3 or 4 of you there, and and if you need to have a mental health person with you, that is something that we say the police should have. But if your aim is to diffuse and not to show that I have the power and I could do this to you, if your aim is to diffuse, you probably could get the man in the hospital without having to use force. So it's an issue for the education of us.
Absolutely, education is liberation, as they say. Ms. Graves, I'm going to bring.
Before you ask
go ahead.
a question,
Yes,
right?
Go ahead.
We talk about the legislation. We haven't had. We've got this old Hospital Act that's been in place since 1885, and however, we are human beings who has brothers and sisters. They're also human beings. They may have a psychiatric disorder, but they're human beings, and it shouldn't take an act to know how to treat your brothers and sisters. It surely doesn't. And when legislation do happen, and it needs to happen, because one of the things I'm looking forward to is that it will hold persons accountable. And at this moment in time, persons are not held accountable for their failure, for the inhumane care that's often meted out to persons with mental health issues. Right? So a legislation, again, if it's not implemented, it is absolutely useless. And I want to reiterate, we don't need an act to treat our fellow human beings like human beings.
And that is a very important point, because legislation has good intentions. Laws are there for a purpose. People still break the laws, yeah? And sometimes laws are not necessarily enforced. There is a constitution. People don't necessarily listen to everything in the constitution, even though they take oaths to do so. But I'm going to bring back, and I know that Ruggles has to go, so I'll bring you back in here, Ruggles, to answer some viewer questions. But last year, Minister of Health, Senator the Honorable Jonathan Lecret, who, by the way, we are going to invite on the Bubb Report to have a follow-up conversation on this in respect of his administration's priority around this issue. Now, he said last year that his administration have seen the need for a wellness council that will be tasked with the policy mandate to promote a culture of physical, psychological, financial, and emotional well-being, unquote. He said, quote, the world is in desperate need for mental health education, mental health awareness, and mental health advocacy in the fight against the social stigma that it brings, unquote. Now, what concrete and deliverable steps would your organization like to see in bringing this vision to a reality? At this point, it seems as though we're starting from zero. So, how do you intend to work with the administration to formulate concrete steps, so that we can see deliverables on that question? Ms. Graves, and then I'll get to Dr. Spencer.
I thought you was actually talking to, as Ruggles gone, because I thought you were talking to Ruggles.
Well, I'll bring Ruggles back in the conversation.
Yeah, no. Minister and his colleagues have excellent good intentions. He refers to the mental health 2009 mental health bill as an act, but he needs to remember it's not an act, it's a bill. That's one. And yes, all these wonderful rhetoric, and that's what I tend to see some of it as. Until there is real action, real action, I will look at it differently. But the person on the ground, the person with mental health issues who are suffering now, that can't wait for a very long time for things to happen. The changes need to take place now. And while I welcome some of his, it's lovely having all these wonderful ideas, and we certainly are happy to work along with him to bring changes into fruition. But we need action, and we need those action now. There needs to be a collaborative approach to dealing with this issue. The police, the lack of training. You talk about you talk about this man who was. You talk about taser and this. Taser person. A person who's discriminative can have a taser and can use that taser excessively and end up killing the patient. It all boils down to is that we don't inherent in our society, we do not see persons with mental health issue. And Ruggles, I have to take up these people. You know who are these people you're talking about? I'm sorry, but I have to to these people. But persons like ourselves, anything can happen to us. We can have an accident. We can have, we can be reft. Those sorts of things, and we can actually need the services. We will actually need the services of the psychiatric services. I think we have to be very careful about our words, how we refer to persons, our brothers and sisters, because that's who they are. And until we change that shift mind pattern of ours that see them differently, they are there and we're here. So then we're going to continue to have this issue. The whole issue of stigma creates person. I think it's one of the problems that creates death by suicide. Persons are afraid, are unwilling to seek help in time.
And then part of it is just the stigma in society. I mean, you hear people say, and I'm sorry for those who and this is meant as no disrespect to people and their faith and religious principles, but you hear people say that some folks with mental illness, that they're imbued with some kind of demonic possession, that it's not necessarily mental health, it's a demon from the pits of hell.
Well, we hear persons say that a lot, and it is said so in the religious by quite a lot of persons who are religious, right? But yet we are religious, and we still fail to treat our brothers and sisters as they should, as God says we should treat them. right? They're human beings. They need our love, they need our respect, and they need our support. And I believe we've continued along this path far too long. You know, we've been moving at snail pace. When you talk to people about, oh, they want to move at snail pace to bring changes, you cannot bring changes which are affecting persons right now, affecting their quality of life at a snail pace. So action needs to be taken.
So you're saying that this is a matter of urgent dispatch.
Very
Same
urgent.
question.
It's a huge problem in our Grenadian society, and it's not. I remember Dr. Spencer said it's probably going to take years and years and years to shift people's thinking. Come on, many of us go to church. What do we? It's love that prevails. Love for our fellow human being. We should start there. So the welcoming of each other, and move away from this thing that mentally ill people, they kill people, they this, they that. Oh, how can you get involved with that? We had some Florida State University students here, and they were told, oh, you shouldn't, all this myths about going up to the psychiatric unit. Yet they went up to the psychiatric unit. They were there on Wednesday all day, and they came back with such a positive report about the interaction with the patients there. Actually, one of the professors, I saw her, she was in tears as one of the patients prayed for every single one. If we empower people, we can make a difference. We can make a difference. We have to start. We start on the ground. We start in the home. We start by allowing people to know, look, our churches need to change their views about how they themselves see persons with psychiatric illnesses. And there are many out on the outside who are ill, not only because of we've had 2 years of the COVID and whatever and the pandemic and stuff. There are persons who are hurting, deep hurting. And I think that goes way back after the revolution, the intervention and everything. I think we've got a lot of hurting persons that has not healed here in Grenada. And you talk about the toilet facilities. Let me tell you, the majority of persons living with psychiatric illness, their housing is extremely poor. Extremely poor. Many of them hasn't got running water inside, no other sanitary facilities. And this is what we call a nation that's moving ahead. Moving ahead to what? We've got enough PhDs, persons who are educated, and yet we are still very backward. It's about time we start taking stock and start treating our vulnerable brothers and sisters as they should, with love, with respect, with dignity. They are one of us, and we should continue. Well,
absolutely. We have to. Ruggles, let me break because in respect of your time, you want to add to anything what Ms. Greaves and Dr. Spencer just articulated here, especially in terms of those concrete steps? Yes.
Yes, let me just clarify. When I made mention of teaser injections, I was just speaking about issues that came out of the consultations. In other words, you do not require the kind of extreme force, and the police are not necessarily to blame because that's the way they know how to deal with it. You meet force with force. But I totally endorse the statements made by Ms. Greaves. What I do want to say, however, is that, this issue has to be dealt with at different levels. So, for example, the Friends for the Mentally Ill, they have a critical role to play, as they have been doing, in sensitizing people about mental illness, because you have different degrees of mental illness too. depression, ranging from depression to extreme behavior and so. But there's need for sensitization. But however, you also need the legislative underpinning to do certain things. That is extremely important because, as I mentioned earlier, for example, to the focus on the Mental Hospitals Bill Act, 1885 Act, that was on hospitalization, institutionalization. In other words, somebody is deemed to be mentally ill, you hospitalize them. This act de-emphasizes institutionalization, hospitalization, and focuses on community care and treatment. It also highlights several rights, and those include the right to the best available mental care, the right to protection from economic, sexual, and other forms of exploitation, physical or other abuse and degrading treatment, the right to exercise, very importantly, all civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights, the right to be afforded a fair hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in determining issues such as capacity or incapacity. So, for example, if somebody says, well, listen, this person is behaving in a particular way, I bring you to the hospital, I want you to to hospitalize or institutionalize them. There's a procedure for that. The right to the protection of their interests, the right to live and work as far as possible in the community, the right to a hearing with due guarantees and within a reasonable time by a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal previously established by law for the determination of his rights. In other words, not even in certain instances can an individual doctor, it's based on the discretion of a doctor, who can say, listen, you keep this person for a month or 2 months or 3 months. It can't work so. There must be interventions over that period, and a tribunal ultimately has to determine whether that person ought to be kept or released. You have the right to privacy, for example, receiving and interfering with a patient's correspondence, and the right also to have a personal representative. In other words, you are unable, because of lack of mental capacity, to represent your own interests. The court appoints somebody appropriately to represent your interests. So the new bill is really far-reaching, and it moves away totally, culturally and otherwise, from the construct of the present Mental Hospitals Act. And that is why it is important that you have an act under which offenses are created. So in the event that people, for example, there are a couple of offenses that I recall from the new bill. One was assisting a patient to leave or attempt to leave a mental health facility without proper authority, inciting or counseling a patient to leave a designated mental health facility, or ill-treating, assaulting, or willfully neglecting a patient. All of these attract criminal sanctions under the bill. So I'm saying here is that we have to see separate roles for separate entities. So, for example, in my own respectful view, an entity like the Friends of the Mentally Ill can certainly advocate to have the act, a new and modern act, passed. Whatever form it takes, all I'm saying is that there was already a draft, and that process was led by PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. In other words, a regional body. And for whatever reason, others can best explain why nothing was done with it after. But it's good to hear that there are some initiatives being taken in that direction, one. And two, quite apart from that, the importance of continuing sensitization of the public on issues regarding persons who suffer from mental health. Because, you know, you have people who suffer from mental health around you who live what apparently normal lives. People who suffer from depression. I had a very good friend who suffered from depression and took his own life several years ago. He was an upbeat person, very active, very upbeat. But, and you would not associate the word depression with him. Because
and I think I know the individual you're referencing.
Yes,
Yes.
certainly, well-known national figure. So I'm
Yes.
saying,
Yeah.
you know, we have to change the image and perspective of society, and that can only be done through public education. And you know, I always advocate that, Kelon, public education is so important, and that's why too institutions like the Friends of the Mentally Ill, they have to play an important role in this entire process. And I assist as much as I can, despite my competition for time this morning. I know.
Yes.
I was checked. I must commend her to Sarana Mitchell.
Correct. As a matter of fact, Sarana Mitchell is the one that reached out to us and said, "Hey,
right.
Here is this mental health program that the Bubb Report should examine." So
Yes.
credit to Sarana Mitchell,
Precisely,
a former colleague of mine at
precisely.
GBN as well, for doing that. Yes.
Yes. She has been doing a tremendous job. So you see what one voice can do. One voice can do so much. Sometimes we think that we are a voice in the wilderness. We are voices in the wilderness, and it won't make not much difference. So why waste the energy? But on an issue like this, as I repeat what I said before, that you judge society on the basis of how the poor, the marginalized, and people with special challenges are treated. And if you ignore this important sector in your society, then it's, and you treat everybody else well, then it's a serious indictment on you. And therefore, it's important to call on the authorities to put this whole issue firmly on the legislative agenda.
Again, the Bible talks about whatsoever we do. Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, talks about whatsoever we do to the least of our brothers, that we do unto ourselves. Yes? And I think that's a very important point. But Ruggles, any final comments from you, because I want to respect your time?
Yes. Well, thank you. Well, just let me say, and I think I should commend you also for hosting a program like this. It may not be as exciting as several of the other political programs and controversial issues, but it's important nevertheless. And in moving forward, there is material there. I know there is the draft bill one, and that draft bill inputs were made by the technical experts from PAHO. So it may need some updating, but at least there is something to start with. There's a report inside on the results of the consultations that were held sometime back in 2010, 2011. And of course, further consultations can be held. That was 10, 11 years ago. But I think we should begin the process as early as possible. And if this year has been designated as the year to focus on mental health, give some focus. It's an opportune time to start that process. So let me just end by, commending again the Friends of the Mentally Ill. And I know Dr. Spence is always checking me on. He's always involved in some organization or activity for the mentally ill. And I think he, remains an inspiration for many out there, because he does not have to do it, but all of these things are being done voluntarily. And I think these efforts should be applauded. And I know, of course, Ms. Greaves has been involved in activism at several levels. And I see that the Friends for the Mentally Ill is no exception. So continue the great work.
Absolutely, Ruggles. Thank you. Thank you so much for appearing. And of course, we want to have you back at some point to discuss that data protection bill. Of course, the next step is going to the Senate. But again, public education. Someone here, Keston Henry, saying Grenadians rather watch Bacchanal and confusion as opposed to focus on serious issues such as this. But I trust that, folks, those of you who are watching the program, if you can share this live so that other people can have the opportunity to tune into this very important discussion. Ruggles, thank you so very much. And as we will continue this conversation here, Ms. Greaves, and Dr. Spencer. Now, let us talk about the current state of mental health outside of these institutional challenges that we talk about, right? Now, the Pan American Health Organization in 2020, that's a report that was done pre-pandemic, so I can only imagine the data for the post-pandemic period might be more glaring and more significant. They said that 60% of mental health patients in the Caribbean are less likely to have received mental health treatment or counseling. Poverty, instability, and discrimination are the leading risks for depression in the region. Discriminatory attitudes and behaviors are preventing people from speaking out from fear of being labeled as crazy. Also, misconstructions and stereotypes are leading to a perception that mental illness is more likely to pose a risk of violent behavior. And as a result, sufferers continue to ache in silence. And this is the million-dollar question for all of you. Where do we go from here, given this glaring reality? And I can only imagine, given the pressures that the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought upon our societies, that these numbers are exponentially higher than what this research is reporting. Who wants to answer this?
Well, can I
hope that more persons are listening and looking at your program today.
Yes.
But I think we all know well, I shouldn't say they know, but quite often information is given as to how you could get assistance. There are clinics around the island, including Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and persons could go there. But the issue still remains that lack of education that family members have, and not wanting to get help. The patient, even though I heard yourself and Mr. Ferguson speak about the community care and Ms. Grace, but we could go as far back as 1850 when they had a lot on the Cardinal Baines lot, and they were housing mentally ill patients there, and they didn't. The workers, they said, that came from there, neighbors did not want to have that lot there for much longer, and so they were moved from there. In 1847, the Lunatic Act, as far as I know, as far as I have in my reference, 1847, the Lunatic Act was invoked. And from the 1850s, the governor of the jail was writing to England about him having to have persons with mental illness in a facility where they were not being well cared for. So it comes right back to the education of the general public, including the family. And the family are unwilling to have to come out in many instances because of the stigma that is going to be applied to themselves and the other siblings or the offsprings and so who are going to be tainted with that brush of M or C or L, whichever word we choose to use. So it needs to have, well, what is helping us now in the Friends of the Mentally Ill is that we have a patient or patients who are willing to be on the soapbox and making it public. And I think that has been our greatest, when I say the Friends of the Mentally Ill, greatest asset over those many years that we were functioning, seeing persons like persons like myself and others pushing the narrative. So now we have assistance, and I always knew that was the only way we were going to move forward, when we have persons with the illness talking about it in public, and you could see them and recognize their so they talk about their challenges, and you could be aware of what is happening with them. And I think that is we have to have more of that. Those of us in the organization, when the organization started, I suppose we were all in age already, and we're aging more, and young persons are not seeing it fit to be part of the organization. And I think we need to have more of those. We need to have often we meet with the police, and we just need to encourage them. I think that the staff, we have to have, there must be what I want to say, when there is an issue, it needs to be dealt with, and dealt with professionally and thoroughly. So if there's a charge brought against someone, then that person, we should be made to answer, and
should be held to account. Yeah,
should be held to account. Yes, and I think
absolutely
that is something that has not been happening, and so we get more and more of the thing. Say it's a small number of persons, I would think, about whom charges have been made, and with the number of staff whom we have. But they say one apple will spoil the entire basket of apples if it's not one spoiled apple, if it's not dealt with.
And Ms. Grace, I have to say, I do admire your passion on this issue. Your passion is infectious, but with a good cause. And do you think, again, in respect of the reporting of mental health, you wanted to answer that question? So I want to give you an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Ruggles spoke about the 2009 bill, Mental Health Act bill, no act. And Friends of the Mentally Ill had responded to that in length, because we could see the gaps, and we made reference to a number of areas which needed to be addressed. Of course, we're starting again from scratch, where sensitization will be done with the public. So hopefully, this new administration under Minister Lacrette will take our views on board.
But stick a pin, please, if I may, because I am just I'm quite frankly very disturbed, and usually I'm not one to insert my personal view in the context of the program. But again, this piece of proposed legislation has been there for so many years. As an advocate, what do you think is responsible for the fact that the previous administration did not take that up?
I mean, I don't know. Again, I know it is finance, but we can always find money for a number of things. And I believe it's because we view physical illness so differently than we see mental illness. And this happens all over the world. But I mean, as I said, when this bill came out, and we actually addressed it with sending in, I believe, to Mr. Ruggles, Mr. Ferguson, the areas, the gaps that I spent a long time here in this house, going through things, looking what I saw was gaps. and sending it to him. And we had met with the previous NDC administration before this one. We met with the Minister for Health. We had a march against injustice, talking about, asking for the bill to be enacted. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. But I think also, there isn't enough voices. You can say, Douglas says one voice. And we're grateful for Sorana Mitchell and a couple others who are there now lending their voices. I see Sorana Mitchell as the ambassador that we've been looking for. But again, it can't be on just one person. You become an advocate, and I'm a strong advocate, but when persons do not want to go down that line of advocacy, it becomes very difficult. And, you stick your head above the pulpit, and most times you're the one who's actually getting, you're getting shut on. You get, so you're always seen as a troublemaker, but all you're doing is you're speaking up for those who are voiceless. They haven't got anybody to speak up for them.
Advocates are usually seen as troublemakers. I'm seen as a troublemaker depending on where the wind blows. Some days the government sees me as a troublemaker, some days the opposition does.
Going back to the report by Pahu, I mean, it's an indictment on the whole of government, and I think on society. Because if you have persons who are not able to fulfill their role in society with jobs, many of them can't get jobs and retain jobs. Those sorts of things. It's you're suffering. So your society suffering as a whole, because there are persons who have knowledge, who have skills, who would like to be part of that. They participate in their fundamental rights, and is being prevented from. So data is I've tried to get data on, suicide numbers, and I'm telling you, it is not easy. I don't know what it is that it is so difficult when we see patients that we take details and stuff like that. Yeah, we've got to be very particular what we do with this information, how we store this information, because for myself, I've always been concerned about, patients' data, and sharing of information. So there's a lot for us to do. Government can't do it alone. We need the private sector. We need everyone to come on board. Dr. Spencer told the police. We had a meeting with the police. It's not this organization, but the other organization that I represent, Grenada Association of Professional Social Workers. And they will admit that they lack the training. They lack the training. But I know in the past there has been training at Mungay. But as Dr. Spencer said, there need to be a continuum of training. We need persons who not only qualified, but really, really care, really want to offer a service to their fellow human beings, right? Don't think, and you know what prevailing through our society is, what I see, they're doing you a favor. You're doing me a favor. If I ask you for this, you're doing me a favor. You're not doing me a favor. You're paid to do a job. Get in and do your job. Get in and do. We've got a lot of lazy people here. I'm sorry to say, and that's how I see it. And I think we could do a lot more here in Grenada if we put our heads together, like-minded people, and if we prevail and continue with love in our hearts. And we can make a difference. We need to make a difference, because there are suffering people out there. And we can start by looking at this bill here, really looking at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Let us get to some, Dr. Spencer, I'll bring you back. We'll get to some questions from the audience. Viewers and listeners, please remember to share this program as well. Nicole, actually, let's get to Mr. Keston Henry here. He's saying, imagine there is no central database for linking general hospital, psychiatric hospital, and the prison for people with mental health issues. Psychiatric, Keston, your sentence construction, please. Psychiatric has to go over an assessment again. even if there is forensic history in the prison or some info in the general hospital. Are you following the train of thought of this of this viewer?
Yeah, definitely. Did you want to go first, Dr. Spencer? Definitely.
Dr. Spencer, please. Or
do you want to go, Dr. Spencer?
You could go.
Right. I mean, for many years, we've known this for a very long time, that we need forensic experts and we need a forensic issue. The Richmond Hill Prison is not the place for persons who are really psychotically ill, needs input from psychiatric services, and it's not the place. I don't know how they manage up there. It must be extremely difficult. Neither is Mongay suitable for housing patients who are very, very, when I say psychotically ill, but have been known to, there's a forensic, known to have murdered, right? Committed a murder, commit some crime. There needs to be a special facility that actually houses patients. Not only does it protect the patients, it protects patients. It gives the family some sort of what's the word? Anyway, I can't get the word out. And it actually also protects inpatients in the psychiatric unit and the nursing staff as well, because it's not geared. A hospital as the psychiatric unit is, right? It goes in there and it's as if you're in a prison, because the fences are up. You have to ask the security guard to let you in and out. And I don't necessarily believe that patients who are not at a risk to others, right? A risk to others, should live in such surroundings. We said, if I live in a place that is chaotic, I'm going to be more chaotic in my mind. Mm-hmm. That's the way I see it. And it's unfortunate we haven't got any other community services, but we need to look at there are some complex cases, right? And we need to look at how we provide outreach services to support families, because there are families out there. Yes, they're shying away from the stigma. They're in denial that their family members are ill, but there are families out there who really does need help. And when they're seeking help, I'm telling you, I know for a fact they don't always receive the help. There isn't enough persons around to visit. We need to look at a setting in the home. The psychiatric place is not always a place of assessment. You go into somebody's home and you look at the environment and you pick up on certain things that are happening. You can't do that from the psychiatric unit. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done.
And we have another question here, and Dr. Spencer, I'm going to get you to answer that one. Again, my previous sentence construction comment to Keston and I are friends. It was said in jest. The question from Nicole James Phillip is saying, what is the modus operandi for mentally, you wanted to add, but please, I'm going to read this question and get you to add to both. What is the modus operandi for mentally challenged who do not have the presence of mind to go seek treatment? That's a very important point. Is there a task force to round these people up for occasional care and treatment?
Dr. Bob, I think I answered that already.
Yeah.
Right? But I will say again that I live home with you, and you know when I'm ill. So you shouldn't be waiting. Even so, I understand that the family members don't want to. When this happens, nobody wants to accept that my child or my spouse, even in elderly persons who are nowadays going further, with cognitive deficit, there are issues there too, because we see people walking away from home and getting, and no one knows the outcome. So they probably died. But we know, you see, it comes back again to the stigma and the lack of education, because I do not want to believe that my son is doing this until he either burn the house or harm himself or do something out of the way. There are clinics in every district at least once a week. Every Thursday we are in Mongay. So whether you're Piti Martinique or Karuku, and there are physicians who are in those clinics at the other days of the week. So it can be done. One doesn't have to I mean, one doesn't have to round up it, because how do we stay in the hospital and know what's happening in somebody's house in St. Pedmata or wherever? We do not know, but there are a person there who will recognize, but starting with the family. If the family needs help, there are relatives from whom one could get assistance to take him to a place where an assessment can be made and the management get started. Yeah.
Yes, you wanted to add something to what the previous commenter said around a shared database.
Yes, that is quite a valuable piece of tool for us to have. Many of the patients, there are many patients who are known to be mentally ill, who we see in the prison, and we visit them in the prison once a month or twice a month. We go to see patients there. So there's that shared information already. Yeah? But I understand that more needs to be done, and so it's being worked upon, I would say, because when
Absolutely.
patients are discharged now, they leave the hospital with the information which they could take to the clinic or the DMO's clinic to say, this is the diagnosis, that's the medication or the management, and they could take it from there.
This is such a very important conversation. Another viewer spoke about community outreach. What does that look like, Dr. Spencer?
There are, say in each community, there are at least two what are known as community mental health workers. These are persons who are either say trained in post-basic psychiatry, or just patients who are regular nurses who work in the community along with the staff who visits weekly, as I say. So they will visit the homes. There are social workers, one social worker per parish, and there at least one who will visit homes to get information. When the patient comes, they come quite often because of the way we live. They come with the police, and the police will get a statement from the family members. But the family members do not arrive on the scene with the patient. And so you have to ask for them to come because you need to know what's happening in the house, what's happening in the home. They do not arrive with the patient for whatever reason. Yeah, they do not arrive. But so the social workers will visit home to speak to the family members, and like I said, we have the community mental health workers who are in the districts 4 days a week, except on Fridays when they come to the hospital to give information as to what is happening to patients in their districts. So that's the
absolutely, yes. Ms. Graves, yes, go ahead.
We need to accept that there are a number of persons who are not receiving a service, even though, because there isn't enough person to be able to deliver that services. So I know for a fact that I'm on the ground, and I know for a fact there are a number of persons who are not receiving services. And, yes, we can complain about family members. I really do feel sorry for family members, even though, many, it must be very hard, because if you have a son, daughter, husband, wife, whatever, who is ill, and stigma in the church, stigma here, stigma there, is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for you.
And then
when,
you also have the gossip, a social worker shows up to your house, or somebody who is known to work at the mental health hospital comes to your house. It becomes a gossip of the village.
Yeah, confidentiality is the most unprofessional list of the most unprofessional things that happen here in Grenada. It's sad to say, very sad to say.
Yes,
eh?
fastness.
Yes, fastness. Yes. We fast. I said the other day on the program that we lime, we talk, and it's good. As I say, it's good that we're able to lime wherever we choose to lime and talk about things. But we cannot bring those things into a working environment. We must remain professional at all times. At all times. It is very hard for me if I have an issue. Who do I go and talk about this issue with? I find it actually very hard. We're too unprofessional, and we have to admit it. And then we don't want to accept it, and then everybody takes it personal. She's attacking me, and then don't look at it. Well, as Greece is making sense, Let's look at how we can change. Let's look at how we can do things differently. Everything is personalized. How are we going to get forward? How are we going to learn? How are we going to make the necessary change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is such a very important conversation, but unfortunately we have run out of time on this segment. So, but we are going to be back with the Minister Jonathan Lacrette. I never knew his name was Gayton. I've known him for many years, but the first time I've heard Gayton was Minister. If you're listening, the Bubb Report is open. It was open to you before the election. It's open to you now again. Now that you are in government. Again, I say that in jest. I know the minister. We are friends, so don't get personal over that comment as well, folks. It's a joke. But on a serious note, folks, thank you all, and I want to also publicly thank Ms. Serana Mitchell as well for really being a stern and fearless advocate of the mentally ill in Grenada. I want to thank her for helping us to put this panel together this week. So over to you, Dr. Spencer, for some closing comments, and I'll get to Ms. Greaves. Of course, the next segment, we do have two trade unionists from St. Vincent and the Grenadines who are laying in wait, who just won what I would call a historic victory against the ULP administration in St. Vincent and the Grenadines over vaccine mandates. So we'll be getting into that conversation. Mr. Boucher and Mr. Robinson, thank you so much for staying with us. The region would be interested to hear this. So over to you, Dr. Spencer, for some closing comments as we get to the next segment.
Yes, well, thank you again for having us. And I'm wearing the Friends of the Mentally Ill hat, and more so than any other hat. But what we must say is that if someone who is diagnosed with a physical illness probably could function well, but if in addition to that physical illness, there's mental illness, then it's much more difficult for you to function. And I think we have to recognize that this brain of ours needs to be treated well, and it will treat us well. And we have to be aware that no one goes and gets this illness. In the main, it happens to us because of, maybe quite often because of our genetic genes that we inherited from our parents and maybe grandparents even. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be aware that it may happen to any one of us, and we all should try our utmost to be kind and caring to all those whom we meet along the path of life.
Absolutely. Ms. Graves, over to you for some closing comments.
Yeah, I mean, counting the human cost and misery of abuse to persons with psychiatric disorder is how much harm are we prepared to inflict, that's the right word, on persons who are our brothers and sisters. So I say to you, please continue. Try, change your mindset, change your perception, right? Learn to treat them as your brothers and sisters. We're only in this life for a short time. If we live 110, it's still very short. Let us treat each other as we should, our brothers and our sisters. And I would say, look, if you know anyone, and we all know somebody who's got a psychiatric illness, it's so common. But if you are concerned about anyone, try and encourage persons to speak, be open, and seek help. Early intervention is crucial. And continue to look after yourself, Dr. Spencer says. We need to look after our brain. Exercise is the most important exercise for the brain. You know, we need to get out there. We've got some wonderful things. Our environment is beautiful. We have wonderful sunshine. And look after our children. Come on, look after our children. Spend quality time with our children. Be concerned about your neighbor. Just make a change, make a shift, and let us look after one another, right? Because I believe it will take each and every one of us to make a difference here in Grenada.
Mm-hmm.
It is our country. We must honor that.
Absolutely. And we have one final comment here from Nicole Brendley Johnson James, who says, Dr. Bubb, thanks a million again for accommodating this topic today. Our mind, our brain is the engine of our bodies, yet issues surrounding it are treated with little to no care. We are getting there, though, slowly. Let's talk about it and not suffer in silence. And I believe that is a very good way of really capturing this conversation. You agree, Doctor? Yes, well said, absolutely. And again, our commitment here on the Bubb Report is that we will continue to bring those issues to the fore because they are important conversations to be had. So thank you. Thanks to the both of you.
Yes, thank you again.
Thank you for having us. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, please stand by. We are going to take a break for the day and come back with our second segment of the week. Stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Are you looking for high-quality voiceovers to make your content stand out? Well, you are in luck. We have the perfect voice for you. Whether you want a calm, informative tone to educate listeners on a topic, or a fast-paced, high-energy read that captures audiences and gets them excited, we'll tailor our voice to fit your needs. So don't put off your listeners with an amateur performance. Get professional, high-quality voiceovers for a price you won't believe. Call 456-1316, 456-1316 to put life into your script today.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bubb Report. And at this point, I wish to welcome our two final guests for this week's program. He is Mr. Elroy Boucher, who is the president of the Public Service Union of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Mr. Oswald Robinson, who is the president of the SVG Teachers Union. Gentlemen, you were on the Bubb Report, I believe, a year and a half or 2 years ago. Time is really flying. But certainly for the viewers and listeners in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we would actually love to see who is on here from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So if you can tell us which part of St. Vincent you're listening from, that would be really good. And if you are in St. Vincent, please share the portion of this program. But gentlemen, you were here, as I said, a year and a half ago. And at that time, the Ralph Gonzalves administration was beginning to implement its vaccine mandate for public workers. Now, back then, you gave a commitment, much to the chagrin of one of the guests who also appeared with you, of taking legal action on the matter. You've since taken legal action, and one of you sent me an article about 4 months ago in which you said you were very confident that you were going to win this legal action. So, were you surprised at the outcome of the ruling at the court? Mr. Boucher, I will start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb, for having me on your show once again.
Yes.
Grateful. We were not surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised. In fact, I have always said that our council, particularly Jomo Thomas, have always believed that what the government did would have been found to be unconstitutional, and it actually turned out that way. The confidence that he gave us from a legal perspective really strengthened our resolve and gave us the strong feeling that we were going to be victorious. Mm-hmm. So there was no surprise there. It was expected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Robinson, a vast majority, I would say a large chunk of the aggrieved workers were in fact from your union, and I'm subject to correction, but I believe a lot of teachers were aggrieved as a result of the vaccine mandate, which essentially gave them a choice of either taking the vaccine or you lose your job. Now, again, were you surprised at the outcome of the ruling?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bubb.
Yes.
Pleasant good day also to my colleague, my dear brother Elroy Boucher. Now, we have not been surprised at this outcome. I mean, we have had several conversations with our legal counsel. In fact, the teachers union is emerging from a legacy of having taken the government to court on several occasions, and we have emerged because the government of this country seemed not to have any regard for the constitution of the law of the land. And in many occasions, when we are speaking constitutional law, they are speaking administrative law. And as you know, the constitution is the supreme law of the land. We have had successes with the Ottosam case. There were 3 teachers who were dismissed as a result of violation of our collective agreement. And one of your guests on the program, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, was our attorney in that case. And, you know, so we are coming from a background of confidence in our legal chamber, and also that history of having succeeded all the battles against the government of the day. And we have also been fortified because we are in an alliance now with the Public Service Union and the Police Welfare Association, of which we are singing the same song from the same songbook. So, we are taking a collaborative approach, and that has also boosted our confidence. Yes, the second part of your question, most of the workers have been affected by this mandate. They are teachers. And you could remember that the government said at first it was to make the workplace safer. And now they seem to be changing the narrative to say it's to save lives. And we know that has not really been so from their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Now, even before the judgment, as if perhaps Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalves probably smelled a rat, as we say, he was calling on teachers who were fired for refusing the COVID vaccine to return to work. Now, I do not know under what conditions he was calling on them to return to work, because a lot of them were not vaccinated, of course. But can you talk about how many teachers refused to get vaccinated, and what impact did it have on the school system there? Did the fact that Prime Minister Gonzalves called on them to return to work demonstrate that there were some, I would say, personnel pressures in the school system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that necessitated that call?
Well, first of all, we must go back a little further, where the government of the day were trying to instill in the minds of workers, not only teachers, but workers in general who are affected, that what the leadership of these organizations were doing, that we don't know what we are saying and we are wrong. In fact, the government told the workers not to listen to their trade unions, and we find that very, very disrespectful and uncalled for. So yes, we had over 200 teachers who did not take the vaccine, right? Now, the majority of the teachers in the land took the vaccine. And this is a government who feels that they own the teachers. In fact, when the unions were flexing their muscles to take protest action, the government clearly stated that whatever happens, the teachers would still vote for him, would still vote for them, will still put them back into power. So there's a kind of mindset by the government that whatever you do to workers, you would still stay in power. They would still vote for you, because sometimes it appears as if the government give you the jobs, and when we get deeper into the discussion today, you will see that the interference of the government is a revelation by the court. The work that the Service Commission is supposed to do and the Public Service Commission, you would see more or less they conceded to the cabinet of the country, which is a clear violation of the Constitution. So many of our teachers would have stood their grounds in terms of those who didn't take the vaccine mandate. The question that you asked, there were conditions which were advertised by the Public Service Commission. Mm-hmm. And we responded. Our membership responded because they were asking our teachers to come back to work to produce a test every week. They offered to pay for the first month. And the first month, when we did the calculation, it would have been one for every week, right? Then they were asking the teachers to be fully masked for the entire day and to maintain physical spacing. And this was discriminatory because you were not asking the teachers in the school who were vaccinated to do the same. Okay? So we find that very, very, very wrong. And the teachers decided that they were going to hold their ground. They're going to stick to the guns with the unions. And yes, you're correct. Ralph Gonzalves government would have smelled a rat, even more than one rat, because as the ruling by the judge, there were several rats that he was trying to deal with, and he was unsuccessful, So we continue to stand together as unions, the Police Welfare Association, and the rest of the Vincentian populace, because this has implication for the wider society.
And Mr. Bauscham, I'm going to bring you back here. Was it also the case that Mr. Gonzalves made a call for workers that you represent in the Public Service Union to return to work as well? Were similar conditions stipulated for their return? And was your reaction similar to that of the SVG Teachers Union?
Well, the government made a call for workers within the general public service who are affected to return. In fact, we had to, I don't think they actually made a call by themselves. We had to write the Prime Minister and the Services Commission, and their response was, it was okay. They had no problem. The government had no problem with the workers reapplying for their jobs once there's a vacancy. There was no stipulation, no conditions. We inquired as to the benefits, and I was told that the pensions would be secured. But that is basically it. No mention of lost earnings being recovered or such. So some public servants were in the process. I think a few had reapplied and were actually re-employed, but the majority of them, as just prior to this judgment, did not reapply.
You said they did not reapply. Is there a reason why they did not reapply? Is it a case that they were suspicious of the conditions, or most of them moved on and found other jobs, perhaps in the private sector?
No, I would like to think that at the time that we were doing this, I think it was like less than a month before the judgment came out. So I know many of them, some of them may have been in the process of submitting an application. And there are others who just simply decide that they were going to wait on the judgment. In one case in particular, that is Shefflin Ballantyne, the lecturer from the community college, we would have written specifically on his behalf because he is, the community college is a statutory body, although he's a public servant transferred there. And they would have responded in his case that there is no vacancy. His case was very special in that he was employed at the college while being a public servant and therefore was not reabsorbed into the public service. So that was different. But the others, as I said, some were in the process of reapplying, and others had opted to just wait until the judgment was out.
Now let us talk about compensation here. What does that look like? I mean, these workers, were they given a severance package after being fired? What would not, now that the judgment, and of course the caveat here is that the Gonzalves administration has indicated their intention to appeal, and he seems to be confident in that appeal. I don't know if the odor of that rat is the same as the odor of the rat that he smelled that he smelled before this judgment was handed down. But what happens in terms of that compensatory formula there? Mr. Robinson, I'll start with you.
Just backtrack a little.
Yes.
In addition to what my colleague would have said, some people did not reapply because of medical reasons. Some of them had a history of complications with certain components which make up the vaccines, and some of them were unable to get medical exemptions because the government handpicked a team of, I think it's about 12 doctors who you were mandated to go to. So this deprived the workers from accessing the doctors, the family doctors, etc. Okay? Some of them did not reapply because of religious reasons. And there were others who just did not reapply because of a right to their conscience, a fundamental right to conscience, which is part of the Bill of Rights and part of the covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Liberties, which the government signed on to, right? Others also did not reapply because they agreed with themselves that they have not abandoned their jobs. Because the government would have proclaimed that they have abandoned their jobs, they have deemed to have resigned. The government resigned them instead of they did not resign, right? So that is fundamental. The teachers who reapplied, some of them are still not sure about what they did because a lot of them were under duress. But based on this ruling now, we know that all of them are covered. They did not go with any severance pay. The only occasion we had were a few, just a minority of teachers who did not take the vaccine. The government went to the parliament and amended the Teachers' Pension Act to allow those teachers who are 55, close to 55 and over, to get early retirement with their benefits intact, but they must be qualified assistant teachers and above. So if you are below that qualification level and below that age group, then again you are seeing the discrimination. Okay. So, but we continue with our focus. We know for sure that he has said that he is certain he's going to win. He's also said in the public domain that he was advised by his lawyers, but we have a letter dated the 30th of August 2022, a response to us when we sought another occasion to have a conversation with him to appeal to his conscience. And in that letter, he clearly outlined to us that he was going to appeal.
But while this appeal is making its way through the courts, because we do know how courts work in the Caribbean, while this appeal it's making its way through the courts, what happens to those workers? Are those workers now going to be reinstated?
Well, that is what we as unions clearly stated. In fact, we go back to when we wrote the Prime Minister on the first occasion, and we had a joint meeting with all the organization, including our legal team. We asked the government to stand liability for any adverse reactions for those who have taken the vaccine or unfortunately those who died, right? So based on the ruling of the judge, everybody, all the workers, those who were coerced to take the vaccine, there are persons who took the vaccine like the day before the deadline that the government has given to deem them to have resigned. So we are very confident about reinstatement and also for all benefits intact. In fact, the few teachers who they have taken back on the job, they did not compensate them for the months that they were off the job. Mm-hmm. Okay? So we are watching it we are making moves towards our ultimate goal to prove that this government is wrong, having violated the constitution of the land. And remember, I said earlier, this matter is not about only the workers. It is the entire society, because the government is taking the taxpayers' money to take the same persons to court. Mm-hmm. And we think that this money could have been used to do something much more meaningful. In fact, the government is saying the reason why they do this is reasonable because they are doing it to save lives. In the schools, you had more COVID in the schools than among the teachers who were unvaccinated. There were schools that were closed. The teachers in the school at that time, they were fully vaccinated. And most of them fully vaccinated. At the same time, the government had carnival for the entire populace. There were several public mass activities which took place out there. Nobody placed a mandate on the other Vincentian populace. Only the workers. They took the workers and they put them on the front line. They even put sanitation workers on the front line. And they said they made an error. So we are not going to give up. We are going to fight to ensure that workers get their benefits. You can't unilaterally decide to impose a mandate to change the working conditions of workers when some of these people were operating almost 20, 30, 33 years. And all of a sudden, you just come and say you must take a vaccine in order to remain on the job. It cannot be right in any right-thinking society.
And Mr. Boucher, and then we'll get to closing comments. Same question here in respect of what will happen now in terms of enforcing that court judgment. And we know that Caribbean governments, not only in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but they are notorious for not enforcing or following through on what the courts dictate that they should do. We've seen that many times in Grenada, where sometimes attorneys have to go back to the court to get them, to force them to follow through on the judgments.
Well, our government is quite similar to the Grenadian government, who were guilty of such. In fact, we may be worse than that. But this approach to getting the government to obey the ruling of the court is not just a legal one. There has to be an industrial approach. All the workers were asked by the trade unions to report for duties, and they would have done so last week. And they were told on the advice of the Attorney General that the matter has been appealed and there is an application for a stay of judgment. There has been no result of an application for a stay, so that's the legal side of it. I really can't see again why or how they can be victorious in an application for stay, because it's an incontrovertible fact that the Service Commission, the Police Commission, the Commissioner of Police ceded its authority to the Minister of Health. And the way the Public Service Commission was set up by the framework of the Constitution, it was supposed to be a buffer between the public service and the political directorate. In fact, they were supposed to offer that protection from political interference. You had a minister making rules that resulted in public servants being dismissed. A minister doesn't have the authority to make such rules. All that power is with the Service Commission. That, if it's one thing I know that cannot be overturned, is that simple fact. The commission cannot cede its authority. So I really don't see, I'm confident that there is not necessarily going to be a stay because of that. And that aspect of it alone means that all of the public servants were illegally fired. And the judge's pronouncement that they remain public officers and they never cease to be public officers then becomes very relevant. But I've said, our approach cannot be a legal one alone. We have to bring pressure to bear on this government. What this government is actually doing is using the public purse, and it is appealing against the very citizens that it is entrusted with to protect. So you are you're appealing in a matter in which the workers are totally innocent. So the government is appealing against its people in an effort to continue their suffering and their prosecution and persecution. The unions, and by extension, the public, which is the work that we have to do, has to put up some form of resistance. And on Monday, we are starting that on Monday at 12 when we have a picketing at the Ministry of Finance by the financial complex. But there has to be a series of industrial action that sends a clear message to the government that we have had enough and they are no longer allowed to create such hardship for hundreds of innocent public servants, policemen, teachers. There are people who are on the verge of losing their homes, becoming homeless. I mean, people are in tears. They have no answer as to how they're going to. So it is clear for us that we cannot just wait on an appeal in this case. The judgment has been handed down, and the aspect of the judgment that cannot be disputed, and that is in the favor of the workers. So there has to be some serious industrial action. We would attempt to shut down the public service in our effort to pressure the government to obey, which is what is now the law of the land. In fact, Dr. Bubb, I'll tell you that it is our belief that immediately the judgment should be implemented because there is no stay. It is now the law of the land. So for the Attorney General to say, we are going to apply for a stay, it has not been done. So in my view, they are already in contempt of court because this current judgment, unless there's a stay, becomes a law of the land in this regard. And they are disregarding all of that. So the public, and by extension, all the persons who have been affected, their families, must bring pressure to bear on this government to send a very clear message.
And we have a viewer comment here from Mr. Ernesto Jose, who is saying, essentially, I'm going to put it up here. The NDP, who in opposition celebrated the judgment as a huge victory for the workers. Question, can you tell me if they had anything to do with this case against the Ralph Gonzalves administration? I think what he's also saying is that what Mr. Gonzalves and his administration is saying, the reason why they're appealing the judgment is because not having a vaccine mandate in place would put people in danger. Your thoughts? I'm going to start with you there, Mr. Robinson, on that question. The NDP's involvement in this case.
Well, the NDP as a political party is not involved, but the NDP would have spoken publicly on their own platform to say if and when they get into power, they would end the mandate and reinstate all workers with all their benefits. Yes, opposition have a role to play. When the Ralph administration government got into power, he was in opposition. And he was part and parcel of all the discussions with the rest of civil society to get into power. So the NDP has a role to play, but the NDP would have spoken a few days and said they are not interfering with the role of the unions, but they are in solidarity. You see? So whereas they have their role to play, and you know, we are not taking any partisan approach to this thing, but we are not going to exclude anybody out there, whether you're political, religious, or whatever. We are all inclusive in our fight for this mantle because we have to protect our fundamental rights and freedom. We must defend and uphold the supreme law of the land. You know, and Brother Boucher mentioned about the radical action, the social action that we are going to have. We are also going to make sure that God remains at the midst of all our activities. And we have a committee in place. We are also going to have a Thanksgiving service and continue to make intercession to the Creator because we believe that this victory came from the Almighty, you know. And Brother Boucher also mentioned about the suffering. We have persons who can't pay the medical, you know, and they are not sure if they get critically ill now. There's no security there. How it has affected the education system. In fact, the Minister of Education spoke in Parliament recently, and he said there were 100 students who wrote the CXC exam, and didn't even get one subject. And we know, we already predicted that if you do not have adequate quality, experienced teachers in the educational institution, it definitely will have a ripple effect on the quality of education. And quality of education has a direct correlation with the performance of students. In fact, the minister said, when we asked the question, because they were boasting, oh, we have substituted those who were dismissed, those who have abandoned their job, with more than the vacancies existed. But when we asked the question, how many qualified, experienced teachers you had as substitute to fill these posts, who you hired? The answer was 7. You have
Only
fired
7.
over 200. You're talking about people who are lecturers, people who are graduates for years, more than 10 years. And you have launched, I'm looking for the word, but you have launched an attack on quality education of the nation's children. This is an assault of the highest order, which must be written down in the history books, even in the Guinness Book of Records. There is no government in the Caribbean, and I think in the world, who have fired over 500 workers because you want to maintain the integrity of what you put into your body. And it's a serious matter. It's far-reaching. And we are resolved in our struggle to ensure that we prove that the government is wrong in whatever it's doing, whatever it intends to do. You have to listen to the people. You have to listen and obey the law of the land. The judge has ruled, and imagine the government is saying the judge is wrong.
And then finally, and Mr. Boucher, I'm going to bring you back in here for some as we wrap up the program. What message do you think this judgment sends for matters concerning COVID-19 vaccine mandates throughout the Caribbean, at least in jurisdictions of the OECS, where the OECS Court of Appeal is one of our penultimate jurisdictions before going to the Supreme Court, of course. But in other jurisdictions, you did not have such an extreme mandate in respect of the public service, but certain private sector organizations, for example, in Grenada, had mandates in place. And it would be curious to see how perhaps others would use this case as a benchmark, essentially, for looking at other legal challenges as well. Mr. Boucher, as you offer closing comments, what do you think this particular case would do in terms of setting a precedent?
Well, this case basically ensures that anything that any government attempts to do must be done with respect to the constitution of that particular country. It has to be noted and made clear that Antigua, there's a case in Antigua where the Union here took the government to court over its vaccine mandate. And it's interesting, the reasons that the judge threw this case out in Antigua has to do with, one, Antigua declared a state of emergency. Comparatively, St. Vincent did not. And in Antigua's case, the trade union that brought the case was not a registered trade union. That case was not thrown out for bona fide issues because it did not get the time for a judge to go through it thoroughly because of these technicalities. The case in St. Vincent is not one where, from my understanding, where the court is saying that governments cannot protect a nation in terms of a pandemic. This case rests on procedures and violation of the constitution of a nation. You can do certain things, but you have to do it within the confines of your constitution. And you have to have respect for that constitution. Our government clearly had no regard for the Constitution. And all of the pronouncement by the judge in this case made a reference to a violation of the Constitution, and so what they did is deemed illegal and null and void. So for the other islands, it is a guide for them that whatever they are about to do, that they must do that in keeping with whatever the Constitution of that country is actually saying. The private sectors in St. Vincent and in other territories, because we had persons being fired in the private sector for not being vaccinated, which constituted, in our mind, a change in their contract of employment, sudden change, without them being even informed or having any say with respect to that. I've heard the judge as the Trinidad Industrial Court pronounce on that. There has been no challenge in St. Vincent with respect to the private sector and that unilateral change in their contract. And maybe there ought to have been, so that that matter also can be addressed. But in the case of St. Vincent, in a particular manner that clearly showed that they violated the Constitution of the land. And that is the message, and that is what the regional governments have to pay attention to.
Mr. Boucher, thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report as always. This is a very important development. Of course, the other side, the Prime Minister, Dr. Ralph Gonzalves, and his administration have been invited to appear on the Bubb Report, and we are going to put those questions to him as well. We are fearlessly independent here, and so if he accepts, I don't know that maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. But let's see. And Mr. Robinson, over to you, sir. Over to you, sir, for some closing comments. And again, the impact of this judgment on the Caribbean, especially the OECS region.
Well, yes, I want to endorse what my brother Boucher would have said. We have to pay attention to the political interference, because, sometimes politicians would appear as if they don't have any influence on what these public institutions supposed to do, like the Police Service Commission and the Public Service Commission, but the judge would have revealed that there was political interference. In fact, one of the SRNO that the government passed, which reference to people getting back their work, clearly states that it would be done on a case-by-case basis at the discretion of the cabinet. So there is clearly political interference there. The other thing that this, a lesson for the rest of the Caribbean, is that, yes, Parliament can pass laws, but when you have certain enshrined clause in the Constitution, you need a referendum. And when this mandate was passed in the House of Parliament, they did not have a 2/3 majority in the House of Parliament. Yes, they said they had a public health emergency, which comes under the aspect of our Constitution when it comes to pestilence. But there's a procedure also which must be followed in the Constitution. And that procedure was not followed. There's a role for the Governor General to make a declaration. And after 6 months, the Governor General must either revoke or extend it. That never happened. And then they give supreme authority to the Minister of Health. In fact, in the court, there was a little bit of confusion as to which minister, because they had a vague terminology. They said minister. At one time, it appears to be the Minister of the Public Service. On another occasion, he appeared to be the Minister of Health. You see? So we need to pay attention to that. Once you have political interference in the Constitution of the land, you're going to have problems. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we must adhere. Let the various institutions which are protected in the Constitution, let's allow them to perform their duties. The right to property, pension is one of your right to property, and that was violated. Instead of, for example, the government could have given a lesser punishment. Like in the case of teachers, some categories of teachers, you're entitled like say 144 days every 4 years, or a principal 180 days every 4 years. You could have said, let's take away some of your vacation as a punishment. But you take the people off the breadline, cut down the breadfruit tree, and confiscate the pension. And that is equated in the Bill of Rights to torture, inhumane, and degrading punishment. So that again is a violation of your right to your property. And again, the teachers never abandoned the job. They kept going. One of the SRNO that they passed said, if you report for duty, you're entering there illegally, unlawfully. That's nonsense. So I'm saying Caribbean governments need to learn from this. And I want to join my brother and say, I don't know how they are going to get away from all the failing to adhere to the procedure under the Constitution and violation of people's fundamental rights and freedom. You know? So I want to thank you for allowing me to be on your program. It's always a pleasure. And I
absolutely, sir.
I also treated distinct honor also to share with my brother Boucher, and those who are listening. I have a lot of friends in your country too. The Teachers Union there also. Yeah, it's good to have him on the program, the Prime Minister. I think he's heading for Grenada for a meeting sometime soon. I think I heard an announcement to that effect. You know,
well, in the past, many moons ago, you know, when he just, because as you said, you know, the ULP, when they came into power, you know, back in, I believe it was in 2002 or thereabouts.
2001.
Yeah,
right. And a lot of those meetings.
A lot of the same teachers. A lot of the same teachers voted for him, I'm sure.
Exactly. So that is why he felt he has a claim on them. He has a handle on them. You see? A lot of those meetings were held at the Teachers Union office. I was not the president yet as part of the leadership. I took over shortly after that. You see? So whenever the unions make a statement and in some way it kind of launch a good punch at the government, they say, oh, you're political. But trade unions are political organisms. You're dealing with socio-economic justice. When you're empowering people, that is, according to Paulo Freire, he said that's highly political. But we're not talking about the partisan. So sometimes if the government says, oh, the union going on a political road, when you call out the teachers out the classroom, they say, oh, you're holding the children to ransom. So we are accustomed to those kind of rhetoric. So thanks again, and all the best to you. Your program has been doing a great job, and all the people in your country and those who are listening here, right here in St. Vincent Grenadines and throughout the region.
All right, Mr. Robinson, thank you again. Thank you for your services to the students, the children of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I think educators really are the core of development in our societies. So thank you again.
Thanks. God bless you.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, that was Mr. Elroy Boucher of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Public Service Union and Mr. Oswald Robinson, who is the president of the SVG Teachers Union. Both unions sued the Ralph Gonzalves administration over the public service vaccine mandates that were implemented there and won the case. The Ralph Gonzalves ULP administration has signaled their intention to appeal the case. But essentially, the theory of the case here is that the court is saying that the manner in which the vaccine mandate was implemented was done not in accordance with the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And earlier, of course, we had the conversation on mental health. So I want to thank all of you, viewers and listeners, for tuning in to the Bubb Report today. And on behalf of the hardworking producers here at the Bubb Report, we thank you again for your participation, and we will see you next week. Wishing everyone a safe and productive week. Take care now. Bye-bye. Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.